Hello and welcome to Let's H. I'm Ushjo, your host. Scroll down and click the read more, check out the links, follow me on social media and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Become a patron on Patreon for more rewards. Today I have the first in a series of reviews of episodes of Angel Season 5. Why Season 5, you ask? Season 5 really gets the least amount of love, but they were legitimately trying to repair the show after a really bad Season 4. Like, it was bad. There were some missteps in Season 3, of course. See my video on Season 3 syndrome for more of that. But Season 4 just really didn't know what it was doing or where to go. Season 5 came along and changed up things, but unfortunately the damage had been done. Season 5 does some good things and does some not so good things. Smile Time kind of typifies the whole season. It's one of the better episodes, but it also has traits that make it the kind of episode that if you went from Season 2 to Season 5 just to watch an episode, you would probably be saying, "What the hell happened?" The good parts of the episode tend to relate to the puppets and the Smile Time program. The puppets are very well done, and their storyline is legitimately disturbing. Unfortunately, we don't get enough of that to make them seem like a formidable threat. This could have been a two-parter episode easily, and actually given us more on the enemies, rather than spending so much time on the god-awful sub-soap opera level relationships. Like, for example, Angel and Nina the werewolf. Who remembers Nina? Nobody I talked to when I talked about this episode remembered Nina. She's so forgettable. Angel's relationship with her is dull and unbelievable, and ultimately it doesn't add anything to the series, and it certainly doesn't add anything to the episode. Meanwhile, we've got Fred, who has done almost exactly nothing in this season, and Wesley, who has done literally nothing in this season. I liked Wes earlier on, but by this time he had been turned into the exact thing that he was kind of a tongue-in-cheek satire of earlier in the series. To boot, by Season 5 his actor was phoning it in. He was sleepwalking through every single scene. I like the actor, but I would not have been surprised if the show had gone on and this had been his final season, if he had just not come back for the next one. He was so clearly bored with everything, and this isn't the kind of bored you can act through. Not that he was giving a lot of effort acting through it, but he was so done with this series. Pick any episode in Season 5. If it has Wes in it, and if he's delivering any lines whatsoever, you can see how bored he is with everything going on. Smile Time was actually the first episode to air after the announcement that the series had been cancelled and would not be renewed for a 6th season. Joss Whedon reacted with nothing short of shock, and of course a hyperbolic statement about how the show was in the prime of its life. Joss, have you been watching Angel? Season 4 alone should have let you know that the show was not working. What's kind of sad and ironic is that there is a line in it where they talk about how this isn't the first time that the Smile Time puppet demon things have done this, and Gunn says, "Have you seen the last few seasons of Happy Days?" Which, on its own, is kind of a funny line, but when delivered in this episode, above all, is a sad line. It's very sad, because you're looking around at the main cast of a series that started off a strong enough spin-off of a show that had a huge fandom at the time, and they're interacting with a puppet, unironically. It was a neat idea, but when you look at it on the screen it just seems very sad. It would have been different if they had been dealing with the puppets, but to have Angel turned into a puppet was a terrible idea, and I felt really bad and truly embarrassed for the main cast, because by this time so many of them had characters that were going literally nowhere, or they had characters that were so altered from how they began, and not in an organic way, but in a way that was very disingenuous, and didn't seem to suit the character. I've often said that Spike was my favourite character in Season 5, and that tends to be because he's the only one who seems to have any self-respect, individuality, or integrity of character, and I cannot believe I'm saying this about Spike of all people, but he is literally the most interesting and consistent character in Season 5. He also seems to have a legitimate story to tell, and his character has an arc of development. Almost none of the other main cast do anything of the sort in Season 5. Most of them are either spinning their wheels, or it's clear that they've stuck around way too long. The writers clearly have no idea what to do with over half of the characters. That's a real shame because all of these characters had potential. It's just that by now most of them have all gone through it. They were wise to get rid of Connor. He's one of those characters that also had potential, but was generally a bad idea. However, mixing it up for its own sake doesn't really help, and it especially doesn't help in an unsuited circumstance like being involved in Wolfram and Hart. It's not funny, it's not really entertaining, and it certainly doesn't add anything to the premise. Season 5 seemed to be more of a challenge in terms of the fact that the characters were more or less fighting against their very setting, which can work, it just didn't work in this case. But I'll get to that more in another episode that focused more on it. Smile Time, however, focused more on what they were trying to do and how they were helping the community around them. Fair enough. The puppet demons are legitimately scary once they're built up. They're creepy, they're weird, they're malicious. The production also does a very good job with some of the violence in this episode that would absolutely not have been possible if it had been even humanoid villains. There were times when some of it actually made me uncomfortable, and I think that's a triumph because they managed to do it with goofy puppet villains and made it seem grisly and unpleasant. So bravo with that. The puppet parts of the episode, when dealing with the enemies, the monsters, those are the best parts. They should have just cut out everything else and dealt solely with that. But unfortunately they were trying to build up Fred and Wes's relationship, and these two have zero chemistry. They also throw the character of Knox under a bus, when he's really been the only one to interact meaningfully with Fred up to now. As I said before, Wes has been sleepwalking through the season. The character by now is thoroughly ruined, the actor is not interested, and Amy Acker and Alexis Denisov have zero chemistry between them. They're good actors, they're just not very good in these parts in a relationship. These things shouldn't really have been major parts of this episode, and it ultimately brings the episode down to have them there. It's also part of the manipulative nature of the Buffyverse to try and build up a character and build up relationships around that character when nothing was done with the character for such a long time, and you know it's only because they want you to give a shit when they ultimately get rid of the character. It can work if it's done more organically than this, but this is just a glaring example of it. You know what you're being set up for. It's obvious. If you didn't know it by now, by the very final season of Buffyverse television, then you are fairly clueless. You haven't paid attention to any of the fairly transparent writing tactics up to this point. It's a stunt repeated many times throughout Buffy, and it only works once or twice before you catch on to it and think, hey, they're manipulating me. They're just grooming this character to get rid of them, and it's trying to do it so that it will be a gut punch at the time, and they can milk it for all it's worth, which of course they do. They always milk it. But I digress, I'm getting ahead of myself. Smile Time. My score? Overall, one of the better episodes of the season. It's watchable even outside of the season. Even if you don't know anything else about what's going on during the season, you can watch this episode and generally understand what's going on. It helps, in a way, that the interpersonal relationships that are made a part of the story are remarkably irrelevant and have absolutely no compelling parts to them. You can pretty much ignore all of that, and you're really better off. The episode is overall more good than bad, but the enemies really could have used a lot more development. They should have been front and center the whole time, and unfortunately they weren't. Also, the Gregor Framkin character is a very, very interesting character, and a very disturbing one too. But they barely touch upon him, and they don't even tell us anything more about him aside from a scene or two. Unfortunately, the villains aren't explored enough when they could have carried even a 2-part episode. If the series had been overall more like this episode and less like most of the other episodes in season 4 and 5, it probably wouldn't have been cancelled. Maybe this is the show that Joss Whedon thought they were putting out there. I don't know. I don't know why anybody would be surprised that Angel was cancelled during its 5th season. But this episode was genuinely popular enough to actually spawn merchandise, which was amazing at the time, and it's generally fondly remembered as a good episode in a rough patch. Deservedly, because most people probably only remember the good parts, which are the puppet parts. The rest of the storylines don't work at all, and they are completely forgettable or extremely unfortunate. Character development during Smile Time is fairly negative for any of the characters that they seriously try and push together or develop in any way. Spike, as usual, is one of the only truly amusing characters in the episode that still maintains his amusement by the end of it. But that seems to be that, as in many other episodes, unless he's specifically being focused on, he has what amounts to a glorified cameo. Still, Smile Time is worth a watch if you want to see possibly the best example of what Angel had to offer in its final season. Smile Time is generally a good episode to watch. Angel, for once, is fairly sympathetic and likable, rather than being either a complete asshole or a milquetoast wallflower, and the antagonists are genuinely compelling even though there isn't enough time spent on developing them. It's almost a kind of window into what might have been had the writers come together and made a more solid season rather than what we got. Check it out if you really want to. Follow me on social media, again, and become a patron on Patreon for even better rewards. See you next time. Bye.